Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert. I'll be your guide in this meditation practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week we'll explore the blending of shapes over space between them to create some resemblance of form, going from any kind of 2D shape positioned in space to a very simple, direct loft connection to a more complex, moving, wiggling connection and see where we find ourselves as we work around the page. We'll cover the basics of the technique during the warm-up, so all you need is a pen or pencil, some paper you'd like to draw on. I'm going to also have a couple colored pencils, though I don't know if we'll get to them, but they might be fun if you have some time after the exercise to keep going with it. And if you're watching the video on YouTube, follow at the very end to see what I do once I get the framework in place, the wire frame all fleshed out, and can have a little time to play on it with some color, some shading, and some highlighting with heavier pen. Let's dive right in. So go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. The kind of geometric or technique focus of today comes from a tutorial that I just randomly watched this morning. Came out, thought it might be good for some of my students, but it was dealing with some ways to 3D model stuff in software, and was looking at a tool that I hadn't thought about in a long time called blend shape or blend curve. And it's a nice way to interpolate between things to get new forms. So we'll take that as an idea and see what we can follow with it. Get some pens, some pencils, whatever you feel like drawing with today will work fine. I think I'll start with some pens and then maybe bring some colored pencil in if we have some time at the end. But a really simple way to think about it, if we're not talking about shapes, just a curve, is you might have two lines somewhere in space and want to find the surface between them, or the lines that could exist incrementally between them, and you can connect the two endpoints and get some kind of planar surface. You don't really know what it is without more geometry, but it's something there. And if you have more points, like the lines have different definition. You could have a straighter surface, a bendy surface, something like that. And so you can play this game out also with curves. If you have two curves, kind of the intensity of their curvature, or just an arbitrary spacing of things could do a ruling across the surface, and straight lines that connect to another thing like that, and the way their spacing moves around affects how we perceive its curvature in actual geometry. It would be a description of its curvature, and the same could happen with simple shapes. Familiar with like a cylinder, two circle-ish shapes far apart from each other, and if we begin to connect similarly around their edges, we can find that surface that blends one shape into the other. In that case, they're just a direct thing, so we get that cylinder, and then anywhere else along it, you can kind of repeat their shapes and get more or less definition to the object from just some lines. And finally, you can do things that are a little less specific and have some variability to them. So two shapes, still effectively kind of a cylinder or cone. Two ends can come in to meet each other in a straight line way, or we could even start to imagine them coming in and meeting in other ways. Give it some shape, and then let the same elements between it try to find their reciprocal relationship to the other side and get something that is some kind of a form. And as we play with these, we'll then have more develop kind of in a sequence and deciding how we get from one to the other, whether it is that quick route, straight line, you get kind of a faceted or boxy kind of surface, or one that uses the tangents and kind of flows its way across to come in smooth on the edges. And then we can take many rulings or edges and keep building that shape up over space and time. Anything from a line to a rectangle to a circle to a squiggle will all work just fine, and you can change them over the course of the drawing as well. It'll always be able to blend and kind of right one to do it if you don't have a computer keeping track of your geometry. And as we enter into the exercise and think about with a technique, anything there where we can bring our attention in it, in this case it's bringing to the mind a little bit of form, that figure or profile that makes a shape. How do we guide it, observe it, and then bringing into the imagination the space between things, two or more shapes along a page somewhere, and we're finding the path between them, trying to bring connection there between them, and then bring multiple rounds or layers to that connection to bring a bit of a plausibility or recognizability to it in the case of drawing. Take a few just relaxed with a little bit deeper than normal breaths and think about what kind of shapes you'll play with. Round shapes, squiggly shapes, square or curvy shapes. See which ones might flicker or pass before the mind's eye, or if visual things don't pass there, just the words, what interests you. Repeating it maybe a little bit. Squiggles sound interesting. I'll work with squiggly or wobbly shapes. Squiggly shapes that close around space. And maybe you see him a little bit, or we just enter into that page, the empty piece of paper, holding a pen or pencil or other instrument of drawing, and think blank shape, whatever shape it is that you might work with. Find a place on the paper with the hand, any orientation, directions, and can wander and squiggle all over the place. And make your first shape. Whether it's more round, less round, more even or less even, we'll play a game with our eye, whether we see it more flattened or more direct to us, but the shape from any orientation is just another shape distorted to that orientation, so there's no real one there, just a 2D shape on a piece of paper. And what we'll do first is just a simple getting familiar with kind of more cylindrical extrusion condition. So somewhere above or below that shape, left or right of it, but more along its axis relative to the roundness of it. Draw a similar shape, similar width, similar squiggles. They don't need to be exactly the same, but similar features. As they're similar, we get more of a direct transfer between them. And we can begin connecting their edges. The outermost right edge tracked over the space between them to the outermost right edge of the other one. And if that moves or wiggles, that's a part of the form, part of the shape. If it's a straight line, that's just how that is for now. And another tracking from outermost to outermost, where you kind of identify that visually. And now that gives us kind of a break, a bifurcation between the two sides, front and back, around those two edges. You can imagine the front edge, depending on which way you see it. You might see the bottom as the front, you might see the top as the front. But we just give it a name and say the front edge can continue to connect similar to the outer points. Again, straight or a little tapered, direct, little wandering is all fine to explore, and it will build over the course of the whole drawing. And now getting comfortable with it, moving along curves, looking, since there's similarity across the two shapes, how the straight line kind of finds a similar place just to the other side. And once we kind of cage it in there, we see a little bit more, perhaps the front takes shape. We could bring a little emphasis to it. It helps to see a little difference between front and back. A little definition to the outer edges. It'll keep growing over the face of the page, kind of a wiggly cylinder forming for me there. Now somewhere else, same orientation, counter orientation, not too far off, not more than maybe 45 degrees or so. It can be a little ways away, some other kind of shape. Again, slightly similar, but feel free to have a little bit more deviation for this one. And work your way around it. Similar bumps, but maybe quite a different orientation, quite a different length, width, exaggeration, or softer form, just something similar but a little different. And in the same way, using our eye to track along, to recognize curvature, angle, proportion, try to draw a fairly similar shape, just a little bit down, kind of as if we just pulled it and repeated it, or a little bit up depending on the orientation, but just a little ways away, another kind of cylinder of sorts. This time going a bit slower, tracking with the eye as you move along the curvature. And that tracking from one location to another could end up with a nice copy, or could end up with a little bit of wiggle as the attention draws to one place and not the other. Attention to the thing before, not on the action. We'll play in that oscillation between attention, foreground, and background. And then we follow the same set of things. One thing we can do is recognize the number of lines. You can always add more. You can't really take them away if you do spend, but you can add more. So if you kind of look at your first one and there's the outer two edges, we always get those a bit for free. And then I happen to have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 internal ones. And so I'll try to keep that same rhythm. Again, draw one more or one fewer. It'll all balance out in the end and create something unique in the shape. And as you start to fill in, again, that front face from the back face of the two paralleled shapes. You bring a little attention to the speed of that mark. A nice simple line connecting 2 points on curves. Keeping a little track of how many you draw. Their spacing is up to you on the thing. Trying to remember if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That relocation from one place to another, a part of the practice of keeping it in the attention, keeping it in the mind as we bridge shapes together. I think we'll do a couple more of these small runs. It's a chance to enter into our breath and bring that awareness of transpositioning into our foreground. So you can kind of think of this starting to maybe form a bit of a path. Maybe there's another shape just a ways up and turned a little left or right, just a ways down and turned a little left or right. Wherever that feels comfortable. And the same thing where we use the similar features, but you might exaggerate quite a bit more, push and pull, shorten or lengthen. We have room to play in the shapes, especially if they're not specific, but if it's a rectangle or square, be it longer or shorter, bigger or smaller. And prepare now, knowing kind of the rhythm of the things as you're going to reposition this shape a little ways away from itself. To have a few breaths, let your mind and your eye sync up with your hand. Bring that to the foreground of your attention. And try to do a nice tracking along the eye, following the curve as the pencil move on the paper. And the goal is less exact replica and more of that immersive, mindful attention to following one thing, transpositioning it into another place. There'll always be some difference. Maybe that's rotating in space, maybe it's changing size. We can make our narrative there. As we start to connect them again, those two outer divisions and your number of internal divisions, taking a breath with each one, inhaling to prepare for the action, and exhaling the line or curve across that space between shapes. Noticing maybe if there's places you have to bring a little extra attention, it's still kind of dog bone and choosing one or the other. No real right answers. Where do you think front and back kind of take their role? And just inhaling as you prepare and exhaling to move through that open territory. A few centimeters of actual space, 2D space, the length of the line on the paper. They may begin to look like physical space or form or 3D space, just by tricking our eye into seeing a little differently. Each breath bringing it closer together, bridging and connecting two unique but similar forms into one. Maybe a little highlight here or there to enhance the front edge, enhance the outer rails, if it helps to see it. They work just as well anyway. I think I'll do one or two more of these, moving more fluidly through them, keeping that breath as a guide before starting the next profile shape, taking a breath in, and moving with the flow of it. Finding a new position in that space between a few breaths and preparing with a breath in and moving with the flow of it, tracking along the edge. And the breath needs to replenish, just letting it do it at its own pace until you come back to a place of readiness to bring attention to it again. And feeling in the edges, bridging the gap. Each one line and one breath at a time. Keeping that number of divisions in the mind. You might count them as you go, little breath counting. A nice layer addition to the practice. You can draw as many of these as you like around the page, thinking a little of their sequence. Here I have a bifurcation, a split. There'll be something interesting to explore. Do one or two more at your own pace. Take a little time just to listen to the breath, to observe the paper and a little fun drawing some of these figures. Minding the breath, minding the pacing. With that, we should start to have a good number of little chunks, three-dimensional-ish shapes built from two-dimensional shapes and lines, and to play out a composition, a figure that's whatever's emerging on the page for you. And what we'll start to do is blend these chunks together, think about how they transition in that gap between them. And it could be very much in the same way. We have a shape and a shape. We continue just the straight line edges between them. I think it would be fun to give it a little bit more form or figure to it. One thing you can think about there is that each one of these lines that's straight is kind of a tangent, potentially on a curve. And so a curve can come out of it and then turn and go into the next one straight. Just try to maintain kind of straight blends between the two conditions. Feel free to experiment straight lines or bending, depending on how much turning and wiggling is happening there. In that, we have to bridge a gap of space with nothing in it. Taking a breath, moving out from one curve, and trying to reposition to blend right into the neighboring curve. That might cause dents, wobbles, bulges. All are okay. They become a part of that form's transition. Using the breath as a guide to enter that open territory of space and try to follow it on a non-path till it meets another known location. You might get some little elbows, conditions, some twists, some other wiggles that happen there, and then each of the internal lines can just try to follow a similar path, changing little by little as it moves over the space and attempts to meet again at a tangent. The lines can flow in either direction. Just giving yourself a little bit of runway to take off from one line. Move, reposition, and find entrance landing on the next line. But first, just following the breath, trusting the hand in the eye. And maybe with time, it'll open up a little bit. Feel comfortable to play in that blending space in between. You want to introduce some wobbles, some figures to it. First, you'll just blend between them, getting a handle on it, seeing where it goes. And if you happen to have done yourself a fun situation like this, where it bifurcates, you choose to address it simply, do one and then the other, or complexly and do one blending around to the other. I think I'll just do one and then the other and see what interesting crossover happens between. Breathing in along a curve, breathing out as it turns to meet a neighbor in space. There might be little misses and gaps. You can always feather them in or come back with another medium and play with them. So keep on moving through the lines, the surface, bending and flexing, blending from one specific shape to a new specific shape. Noticing the tension of the eyes. Noticing if there's any challenge, tentativeness, slowing down as your brain processes where exactly to turn to hit straight into that next shape. And we'll make some that have little bits of kink and some that are perfect along the way, but you have to get used to it. Using the breath to guide our smoothness. Confronting the strange places, maybe tight turns, or abrupt squiggles blending their way across to more regular, simple ones. And we start the journey without the whole in mind. We have to find ways to adapt along the way. And that begins to bring some interesting moments, maybe little pinches or constrictions, flexing from thin to thick, near to far, new things for the eye to parse out its understanding of shape and form. The rails both helping the geometry and also starting to mix foreground and background a little bit. And keep drawing along, making the connections. A few minutes left. And as the form takes shape, we can add to it, move around it with new little segments. Any squiggle that shares a little bit of a visual relationship with the squiggle proximate to it will become a new extension of the whole figure. And one may also find, as the form takes shape, contoured, both transverse and longitudinal, it is here, and it may open up some other things, seeing some of the strands worked along could be a place to bring in some shade or color. Seeing new figures to help wrap the front from the back, hiding some of the cage or the wireframe. Anything that pops into the mind and bring to your drawing. If we've maintained a fairly even and consistent spacing, the same numbers of divisions across each front face of the shape, you might find a bit of a ribboniness and evenness to it. If there are places where the figure changes more, higher inflection or bumping and wobbling, you can start to add local definition. Wires that only go for a little while in one zone. Anything can continue to roll out onto the paper to make new wrappings, or to become a canvas for new exploring with the eye. We'll do just a few final mappings through, tracing along some of the primary paths, bringing a little emphasis, getting to know what formed through the whole of the body. Just a few moments of play, of emphasis, of seeing at a different scale, the tightness of the technique, the individual attention of each focused connection, now making a whole through the space, using the medium, the pen or the pencil to retrace some of that, to bring a new seeing to it. Every drawing has that deeper potential for play between 2D and 3D. Virtual space of the page, flat, can bring something out of it. You can also absorb something back into it. That happens with the media, the pen or the pencil. That happens with our eyes. That happens with our imagination, our thoughts, and our presence there, and engaging with it. All those complex curves taking a little more attention, a little more action from us to keep them consistent. Time flies by, but as we come to a close of the exercise, the canvas is open. It may invite you to go back in and continue playing. You can take your time to make that choice with a few deep breaths. Maybe a closing and moving on. Maybe just a pause and recollection. But whatever you do for the rest of your day, I hope you bring a little creativity to it and have a nice, relaxed time. After this little ending segment, you'll see I took a little extra time, maybe another 15 minutes or so, to bring some shading, some definition, and just see what it would look like to fill in some more of that foreground, that front-facing side of the emerging objects, and let the background fall away a little bit and bring a little bit more life and color and play into the thing. We start to get something that looks a little bit more organic, maybe like something in a coral reef or a sea creature emerging there on the page. At first, no thoughts of this in the creation, just the simple act of moving little chunks around and bridging them with that nice blended shape and seeing what it'll take on the page. And then maybe over time you start to see opportunity in it. You can guide it, you can design with it, you can develop it into any number of things, from the simple line ruled across a space to a complex wiggly form with nooks and crannies, ins and outs, and maybe even open up some bifurcation, some splits, some holes, and see where this thing can really go. If you enjoyed the exercise, please let me know in the comments below what you created through your own exploration of that mindful bridging of space, that blending of shapes into a new whole. Share with your friends and come back every week for new episodes of Mindful Drawing. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, and draw well. Thank you.